On June 22, 1941, Adolf Hitler set in motion Operation Barbarossa, history's most massive military invasion. The target was Joseph Stalin's Soviet Union. This operation represented the culmination of Hitler's long-standing ideological obsession with destroying what he viewed as the ultimate threat: Soviet communism. Approximately 3.8 million Axis soldiers crossed the border to participate in the 5-month campaign aimed at annihilating the USSR. The Red Army found itself completely unprepared for the timing of the German strike. With its command structure gutted by Stalin's political purges, Soviet forces crumbled under the Wehrmacht's coordinated assault. German forces pursued 3 primary objectives: the cities of Leningrad, Moscow, and Kiev. Within the first month, Field Marshal Ritter von Leeb's Army Group North had advanced to within 135 miles of Leningrad, as Finnish forces allied with Hitler simultaneously pressed toward the city from the north. In the central sector, Field Marshal Fedor von Bock's Army Group Center thrust 480 miles into Soviet territory. One after another, the Soviet Union's vital cities fell into German hands. Smolensk, the crucial gateway to Moscow, fell to von Bock's forces on July 17th. Simultaneously, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt's Army Group South was carving through Ukrainian territory. The Soviet Union appeared to be facing complete collapse. Stalin could muster 800,000 troops to protect the capital, yet among the 85 divisions available, merely 25 remained fully combat effective. The Wehrmacht launched Operation Typhoon, their assault against Moscow, on September 30, 1941. Army Group Center faced multiple elaborate defensive positions built around cities blocking the route to Moscow. The 2nd Panzer Group captured Orel, located 75 miles south of the primary Soviet defensive line, after just 3 days. The panzers then took Bryansk as the German Second Army struck from the southern direction. Soviet 3rd and 13th Armies found themselves trapped in a massive encirclement. To the north, the 3rd and 4th Panzer Armies struck at Vyazma, surrounding 4 additional Soviet armies. The Wehrmacht had shattered Moscow's primary defensive line and taken more than 663,000 prisoners, adding to the 3 million captured since Barbarossa began. Stalin retained only 90,000 soldiers and 150 tanks for Moscow's immediate defense. By October 13th, the 3rd Panzer Group had reached a point just 87 miles from Moscow. The authorities declared martial law throughout the city. However, weather conditions deteriorated rapidly with heavy rainfall and snow transforming roads into impassable mud. German tanks, equipped with narrow tracks, found themselves unable to navigate the terrain effectively. The German command ordered a temporary pause on October 31st, needing to reorganize their dangerously stretched supply lines. This pause granted the Soviets critical time to prepare. Stalin assembled 11 fresh armies, including 30 divisions of battle-hardened Siberian troops specifically trained for harsh weather combat. 1,000 tanks also reinforced the defense. When temperatures dropped and the mud froze solid, the German offensive resumed on November 15th. The German strategy called for the 3rd and 4th Panzer Armies to cross the Moscow-Volga Canal and sweep around the city from the northeast. The 2nd Panzer Group would strike at Tula before approaching Moscow from the south. These maneuvers would force Soviet armies to respond to multiple threats. As they moved to counter these attacks, the German 4th Army would strike directly at the center. For 2 weeks, desperately short of fuel and ammunition, German forces battled toward the city. In the southern sector, Soviet forces halted the 2nd Panzer Group on November 22nd. Siberian units launched counterattacks that defeated the 2nd Panzer. Nevertheless, the 4th Panzer Group succeeded in pushing Soviet forces back and crossing the Moscow-Volga Canal, the final major barrier before the city. Elements of the 7th Panzer Division advanced to within 22 miles of Red Square and the Kremlin, but could progress no further. They were stopped on November 28th, when a massive Soviet counterattack drove them back. Northwest of Moscow, German forces reached Krasnaya Poliana, now called Lobnya, only 18 miles from the Kremlin. Once again, determined Soviet resistance, combined with German supply failures, halted the advance. The German 258th Infantry Division achieved the closest approach. Elements of the division's Panzer Pioneer Battalion identified what seemed to be an undefended gap in Soviet lines. On December 2, 1941, a small reconnaissance force of light vehicles and motorcycle units reached the town of Khimki, near the Moscow Ring Road. The German soldiers who reached Khimki represented the absolute limit of Wehrmacht expansion eastward. These reconnaissance troops, numbering fewer than 24 men, consisted primarily of combat engineers from the 62nd Pioneer Battalion. They held their position for less than 20 hours in temperatures approaching -30 degrees Celsius. The Kremlin stood just 14 miles away, yet minefields, anti-tank ditches, and 3 rings of defensive fortifications still separated these German scouts from Moscow's heart. Soviet archives later revealed that NKVD units and hastily armed factory workers were already moving to seal this breach even as the Germans arrived. The reconnaissance unit waited desperately for reinforcements that would never arrive. On December 3rd, Soviet forces consisting of local militia units, supported by several T-34 tanks, drove them from Khimki. Today, the location of the Wehrmacht's furthest advance is commemorated by a memorial erected in 1966, featuring massive steel anti-tank obstacles at kilometer 23 on the Leningradskoye Highway leading into Moscow. As brutal winter conditions set in and supply problems became catastrophic, the German offensive against Moscow ground to a complete halt. On December 5th, the Soviets unleashed a major counteroffensive. When the Soviet offensive finally paused on January 7, 1942, German forces had been driven back between 60 and 150 miles from Moscow. The battle for Moscow had ended,